Hi, 3DMJers. This is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, just wanted to remind everyone to head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and sign up for our Big 3 newsletter. We call it this because, in case you haven't noticed, our team comes up with 3 new pieces of content every week in the form of 2 articles and 1 podcast episode. Rather than remembering to check back with us 3 times a week, we can send it all to you in one single email every Thursday. This weekly digest also includes direct links to any other content that Team 3DMJ coaches are a part of throughout the entirety of the internet. Whether that's guest appearances, interviews, seminars, or courses, you will not miss any of it. So if you like hearing about all the free resources that we have to offer, all the products we sell, all the projects we are a part of, and all the ways you can get discounts, reminders, and early access to them, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com right now and sign up. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. Today, I'm joined by Brad Loomis and Jeff Alberts as we talk about program hopping. A couple of weeks ago, we asked members of our 3DMJ newsletter email list to submit some of their personal struggles within their fitness, bodybuilding, or powerlifting journeys. One of the most popular concerns that came up was from people who claim they, quote-unquote, knew better, but couldn't actually stick to a training program for as long as they knew they should. Whether it's second-guessing, not being able to trust the process, always thinking they're missing out on something better, or the never-ending paralysis by analysis, this episode covers a broad spectrum of experiences and tools to help with this persistent issue that many of us face. Jeff, Brad, and myself start the episode by discussing our own problems with program hopping in the past, why we think we did it, and what helped us snap out of it. We also talked about the many strategies that we've used to lead clients out of this unproductive habit, and onto finally making some real progress, both on our roster and independently. So I hope you guys really enjoy this one. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this specific episode, you can leave them for us at 3dmusclejourney.com under podcast number 45. So here it is, friends. This is Program Hopping with Jeff Alberts and Brad Loomis. Okay, so Brad, back in the day, hopefully it was back in the day, was there ever a time that you feel like, looking back, you're like, yeah, I was not committing and I was program hopping, like not intelligently? That was a jumper?
Early on, I really wasn't. I was so
lucky,
invested, just emotionally bought into the Maximum Overload training program that I stuck with the same thing for, gosh, I want to say like 3 years, which could be almost as bad as program hopping. But I did go through a small phase. Where, I guess just wanting to try the next best thing and get that little bit more percent of the gains or whatever. I did do a short stint of program hopping. I guess it was like 2005, 2006, somewhere in there.
Before you found the Max OT?
This was after.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, when I discovered Max OT, I was committed to that. I used that from like 1998 until like 2005.
But
like that was my.
Okay, so while you were looking for that, before you found it, what were you doing? Or did you just read that
Not
one
really
day and
training.
that put you in the gym? Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't really training prior to that. And if I did, I would do it for 3, 4, 5 months and then not,
Okay.
and then do it again for another 3, 4, 5 months and then not. So,
Okay.
yeah, like I told you guys, I started pretty late.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really start until like I was 30, 29 or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't really training very, very consistently prior to that. But yeah, and then I just went through a short little stint, probably 2005, 2006. And then not long after that, I met up with the rest of 3DMJ and, pretty much just stuck to the same thing after that.
Okay. I'll come back to that 0506 area. Jeff, do you think that you ever had a time when this was going on where you weren't really committed to a certain way of training?
Well, when I first started training, there was no I kind of made up my own program, and I would just do that every day. Just the same 4 or 5 exercises every single day. But once I started getting into like the muscle magazines, it wasn't programs per se that I was getting like, ooh, it was more like the weeder principles. You know what I mean? Like supersets. Okay, that's the ticket. So now it's like, okay, now I'll superset everything. And when it was like those type of things, I was getting more bouncing around versus like an actual program. So in
Yeah.
a way, I guess it can be a good thing and a bad thing, because good thing, you're learning new things, but then bad thing, it's like, it wasn't quote unquote the answer to everything.
Yeah. I and I don't think I understood programming for a long time. I think I was like you in that I guess I was ahead of some people that I would have like a plan, but it didn't follow like a long-term anything. Like even like 2012, I was like, okay, for the next 4 weeks, I'm gonna do 3 sets of 8 of everything. But it was balanced, and it was like a vertical push, a vertical pull, a horizontal push. Like it
Yeah.
was balanced, but it was like do 3 sets of 8 for 4 weeks, and then I'm gonna do 4 sets of 10 for 4 weeks, and then so it was like I never really thought of it as a long term progressive overload thing. I just thought of it as like these are the exercises. I was changing the rep ranges every once in a while, and then that was it. And I would just try to
Yeah.
lift more like each time I got there. So it was a program, but I didn't really know it. But it took me a long time to get there. But I was kind of like you in that it wasn't. I wasn't necessarily. I didn't even understand that programs were happening. I was just looking for strategies, I guess, like you would say. Like I would
Yeah. Just
do.
like did supersets or
Yeah.
like certain intensity techniques. I always thought like that would be, oh, that's the key. That's the thing that's gonna get me my 18-inch arms or whatever. And it wasn't until I got into when I introduced to the hit training, the Dorian Yates, Mike Mincer style. That was like the first like real program I got on,
Yeah.
and it was, I wouldn't say we weren't following it exactly as like, let's say Mincer was prescribing it. Like it was just a lot of the principles that he had. We applied it. So the guy that I was actually he gave me the program, like the one he created, and I was following his program.
Mm-hmm.
I was just following it that, but I saw good gains from it. So the bad thing was it was a good and a bad. The good was I made good progress because I was actually following something that was well structured.
Mm-hmm.
Might not have been the smartest structure, but it was like a plan, and I was following it. The bad thing about it was I followed it far too long, and a lot of the principles that are in it aren't really the greatest principles, now looking in hindsight.
Okay. And you found it through that guy that you were working out with?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. The first one I did was Wendler's 5-3-1 because Matt did it. Matt and Brandon were doing it. Before I even moved to Cali, it was just like I followed them on the YouTube, and I was like, sure, why not?
Yeah.
Brad, how did
And
you
also
find... Oh, go ahead.
let's say back when I was, when I was coming up, there was no internets, so there was no, like the information we have now.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, what are we getting out of magazines?
Okay.
So, bro splits, working body parts once per week, things like that.
How did you find Max OT, Brad?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that.
Uh-oh.
Speaking of being natty, at the time, this was late '90s. Keep in mind, story time, right? My cousin was telling me about androstenedione that he was taking, and he was in the Navy and he was playing football, and he was talking about just how good he felt on it, and he was really feeling strong and he was feeling fast and quick. So naturally, what did I start doing? I started searching up, and this was when the internet was in its infancy, right? I started searching up androstenedione on my, whatever search browser we had back then. I think that was before Google, I want to say. I'm not
Way
sure.
before
But
Google, yeah.
anyway, I'm searching the internet. I'm searching the internet for androstenedione. I stumble upon AST's website because they sold androstenedione. So I'm reading on AST's website and reading and learning about, all the different supplements they make. And not long after that, they came up with like a 12-week max OT, maximum overload training course. And so that was pretty much how I stumbled upon it. And so, of course, in my thinking at the time, it was like, oh, well, this is perfect. This is going to get me jacked. I'm going to follow maximum overload training, and I'm going to take the androstenedione, and I'm going to follow all their supplement recommendations, and that'll get me jacked, and it's kind of like I've told you guys, when I commit to something, man, I'm hardcore. I am doing it, and I'm doing it for a long time. And shoot, I took androstenedione from like 1998, 1999 until my first competition, 2003. Because at the time, in the organization that I competed in, the INBA, you just could not take, I think it was androstenedione for like 6 months prior to the competition, and you couldn't take ephedra 2 weeks prior to the competition. And I was doing both of those.
Wow. I didn't know that.
I felt like I really made some good progress during those years. But, it was a combination of being kind of somewhat beginner, novice-ish. I was following something very structured that basically the main rule was progress. As soon as you were able to get, your sets of 6, you increase the weight. Work that up, kind of that standard double progression. As soon as you were able to get 6 reps on that weight, you go up again, and I think it was a combination of just following a good structured progression on top of being beginner, kind of maybe novice-ish at the most. Just kind of combined for some really good progress, physique-wise and strength-wise.
Yeah, and I think something that anyone listening, I guess, could learn from all three of those, like little how we started or our first programs or whatever, was that it really didn't matter so much what they were in the fact that we just started following something.
Yeah, you followed it, you worked hard,
yeah,
and you were consistent. I mean, you're going to see some results. It's not like you're not going to see anything. You're still moving some weight.
Yeah, so then why, when you were, Jeff, when you're talking about like, well, I was supersetting this time and I was doing drop sets or whatever the strategy was, you were more strategy hopping, I guess, than program hopping or whatever, but why do you think you did that? Like mentally, why were you not, like, was it new shiny light bulb syndrome, or was it like you didn't think they were good enough? Can you point like why you think you were hopping around?
I was eager. I was eager to improve and get stronger, get bigger. So, I thought there was a magic bullet.
Yeah.
I didn't have the same type of experience that I have now. So, and I didn't have really no one kind of showing me the way. So it was just like, okay, I'm reading something out of a magazine. Oh, Sean Ray does this. Okay, I guess that works. I'm going to do that. Dorian Yates does this. Just yada, yada, yada.
Did you think that oh, go ahead.
And remember back then, like the magazines were like gospel.
Yeah.
So whatever's inside a magazine, that's your source of information. That's like it. For most.
Yeah. Did you add these things and add them? Like if you had, like, say it throughout 5 different issues, these 5 different super jack dudes say, I do this thing, I do this thing. Were you adding them on top of each other, or were you changing directions for those 5 things, if that makes sense?
It was just whatever. There was no rhyme or reason for it or a structure to it. Yeah, it was just go in there and just copycat it.
Until
I might
the next
stick with
one?
it for a week. Yeah, I might stick with it for a month. The one thing I can say that I've always had from the start was just like a pretty good work ethic.
Yeah.
Like intensity levels have always been pretty damn high. I've always been a hard worker. And what's kind of funny is I go back to my teen years, like my first couple of years, like 14 to 17, like when I first started. Mm-hmm. I made more gains in those 3. Obviously, it's newbie gains. But after that, once I started like trying to do like a 6-day split and trying to kind of formulate some type of structure on my own, I made more progress without a structure prior to that in the first 3 years, because I was doing like more volume. I was eating more. And once I got past the high school years and started reading up more, I actually kind of went backwards because I was trying to be too rigid to what the magazines were saying. Like, okay, train 6 days a week. You got to diet this way, that way. And so all of a sudden I started limiting my food, and I didn't know anything of how to put together a structure. So my physique went backwards. for probably,
Yeah.
gosh, I was probably like, yeah, it was after high school, so 1920.
And
I actually looked far worse than I did at 17.
what's real funny is before we started this call for the listeners, Jeff showed us his laundry, right? And it was like, I have these shirts over here and these pants over here and the socks over here. And it's funny that you say this because for someone like you, when you say 14 to 17, I was just kind of doing my thing. I know it was structured just because you like routine. Like you said, it's the same exercises and I would just keep doing them.
Yeah, I'd come home from school and it'd be like, I could tell you right now, bench, overhead press, overhead tricep press, like standing with a barbell, and then a barbell curl. That was it. That's the only 4 ones I did. I did them like every day.
Yeah.
4 sets, whatever. I'd repeat them over and over and over.
That's so funny. And for a lot of people, it's like the opposite, right? There's so much like your 19 to 20-year-old all over the place is like where most people start. Like you went backwards, like you said. That's interesting.
I did. I went backwards. Because I could go back and look at the pictures, and like that's where everybody says I look like a man-child at 17.
Yeah.
Because I was benching 3 times per week, and I was doing my own little routine, and it was consistent.
Yeah.
I'd bench, go from bench to pec deck, from pec deck to overhead press. I'd do a seated row, side lateral, tricep press down, and curl. I never worked legs. I just did upper body.
Damn.
So 3 days a week I would do that. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I wouldn't train because I was like, okay, those are my rest days.
That's so funny.
But there was I didn't know that was halfway decent routine at the time. I just was just doing it. And it wasn't until like, looking back in hindsight, like, okay, the couple of years after that sucked because I tried to. Well, that's when I was really trying to dive in to learn as to the whys.
Yeah. Brad, in 05, 06 or whatever, when you said you were program hopping, do you have any insight as to why you were doing that? Like, what were you looking for?
Yeah, good question. I have to kind of put myself back in that mind frame back then, and I remember vividly at one point, just kind of getting burned out, and I was really hard on myself, I guess, for lack of a better term. If I didn't feel like I put 100% into that set, I was a puss, I guess, for lack of a better term. I keep saying that. Sorry, it's like the second time I've said that in one paragraph. But yeah, and so then of course it's like, okay, I can't do that. I got to put 100% into each and every set, and then that would last me like 2 weeks, of course, because you can't put 100% like failure in every single set. I mean, even if your body does hold up, your mind will give up. Your mind will be like, okay, I'm going to stop here at 5 reps, even though I know I probably could do a 6. And so then I would rack it, and I think, God dang it, I should have done that 6 rep. And I'm beating myself up,
Okay.
And that mentally is hard. And I felt like a puss. That was kind of the bottom line, is I felt like a puss. And so then, of course, I was thinking, I got to find something else because it's just too hard on me. And then a friend of mine that just lives down the road here, he was doing something called the X-Reps program, where, essentially you get done with the set and you extend the set by doing like partial repetitions. So if you're doing pull-ups, and you're failed, you kind of get yourself up as high as you can, and then you do these little partial X-reps. They call them extended reps, right?
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, I think I can do that. Because I don't have to do any set number of extended, sets. It's just you go as long as you can. And so then it was kind of like, okay, for me, in my mind, to be a quote unquote puss, you know what I mean? Because I extended the set. I got 3 or 4 little pulses, right? Sure, I didn't kill myself. But it didn't really suit me very much.
Okay.
I don't know why. I just felt kind of dumb doing, getting done doing a set of squats, then descending halfway down, and then just kind of going up and down, a few inches, extending the set and then racking it. You know what I mean? I got some okay, strength gains right off the bat, but it was not magic. The only thing I was doing is just increasing the volume a little bit, So before I would always stop at 5 or 6 repetitions. Well, now I'm doing 5 or 6 repetitions plus these little pulses. There's nothing magic about that. It's just more volume. is all it is. And so then I get tired of that. And then I thought, well, I'm done doing that. I don't like doing these little pulses. So then I found I think it's Brian Haycock's hypertrophy specific training. And it was a program where, you did more total body training, as opposed to body part splits, And I remember with that program, I kind of liked it and I got some pretty good results right off the bat. But again, nothing magic. I just went from training stuff once a week to multiple times a week. You know what I mean? Because I was doing basically whole body training every single day. Well, and in hypertrophy specific training, as you can imagine, the little hypertrophy little title there, you're doing a lot of repetitions. And in order to get a lot of repetitions, you got to lose a lighter weight. And so naturally, for me, having done max OT where it's heavy weight, no more than 6 repetitions, I was using weight that was like maybe 40% of what I was doing when I was doing max OT.
Mm-hmm. That's a big
well, naturally, in my mind, I'm like, I'm being a puss. And I only stuck to hypertrophy specific training for, I want to say, like 6 weeks. I think it was just like one block, and I was done doing that, And then, not long after that, I was like, well, you know what? I really dug max OT. And so then I hopped back on max OT for, I want to say, probably about a year and a half before I started getting in with, the 3D MJ guys and learning about 531 and, Shaiko and Smolov and things like that. And those programs I dug. When I got into those programs, I stuck to those for like a solid year and a half each time.
When you say you got tired of it, you said that a few times at the end of all this. Besides the hypertrophy one where you're like, I felt like a pussy. All the other ones you kept saying I changed because I got tired of it. What do you mean you got tired of it? Like you were bored? Like...
Yeah, a combination of bored, and it didn't have that appeal to it like maximum overload training did. So yeah, I was a little bit of bored with it, just, wanted to do something new, I guess. And it just, I don't know, they didn't click like max OT did,
Okay.
And looking at it in hindsight, I really didn't know that I was a very coachable athlete. And it all kind of makes sense now. It's kind of like I have a good, I guess a vested high opinion of whatever it is that I'm doing. You just got to tell me what to do, and I'm going to do it, And I think in those few programs, because they didn't click, I just didn't have a very high opinion of it. So it's kind of like, well, I don't, I'm not vested in this. I'm gonna kind of look for that, and that's why I think I got kind of back around to max OT, until I started learning from Eric and learning from Jeff and learning from Alberto, and kind of things started kind of making sense as to why Shaiko worked and why Smolov worked and why 531 worked. And then it was like, okay, well, now I'm vested. Now I have a high opinion of these programs. I'm going to do them. But I think that was more so the reason I hopped more than anything is I wasn't vested in that program.
Okay. Jeff, when did your stint, you said like 14 to 17, like you did the same shit, and then you started looking for other things. What did you end up settling on? Did you keep hopping till 3D came around? When did you learn to settle back down, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Let's see. So once I got away from the high school years, like the first couple of years, it was more like, I remember I came across Cybergenics. I don't know, maybe Brad remembers that.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like
that.
some supplement stuff, and they give you a program to follow. That was the first waste. That was the first waste of money. Yeah, here I am, this kid out of high school, going to Arizona for trade school. No, didn't I had a part-time job, wasn't making hardly any money, and I okay, I'm gonna save my money for this stuff. Bought it, followed this program. Maybe for a month or two, if that. And of course it didn't work because I didn't know anything. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take these supplements, train. But the bottom line was I didn't even have money for food. So
Gotcha.
I wasn't even eating enough for the train. So obviously it didn't work. If I was eating, maybe it might have saw results just because of the training program. But after that, it was like, okay, I'm going to do a 6-day split, hit each body part once per week. Basically the bro split.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing that for about, 2, 3, 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I still wasn't really seeing any type of gains. I was eating, but not eating that much. And it wasn't until I met that guy, and he's like, here, we're gonna do HIIT training, and he basically told me, okay, here, I want you to eat this many calories. It wasn't like a macro breakdown or anything. Just said, hey, I need you to eat this many calories, which was a shit ton, because it was like I was eating like 4,000 calories a day. Yeah, a lot of food. And I was we were training 3 to 4 times per week, and it was just super high intense training. Like every set goes to failure and beyond. So it's like we would do like what was kind of smart about it though, like the compound lists were like, say like lower rep ranges, the fluffier stuff you had at like 8 to 10s, 8 to 12s. So there was some intelligence to it. So but basically everything was like just go till you just cannot move. You hit like 6 reps, 6, try for another one. He'll help you with 4 reps. From 4 reps to negative static holds all in the same set.
Jesus.
Like that's literally like I do every set. Like we would only do 1 to 2 sets max. That was it. But it was kind of intelligent in a sense because you didn't train the next day. You took a day off. So it wasn't like you're doing it every single like a 5 or 6 day split.
Yeah.
So I mean, we could look back in hindsight. It wasn't the greatest, but there was still some decent structure to it. So followed that for a long time. Like I trained with him for probably about 6 months. And then I moved back to California, and I kept the same principles because I started training on my own, but I changed things up. Like I wouldn't just stick with 1 set. I would go, okay, I'm going to do 2 sets. So I'd add like another set in, more volume. I would do more exercises than what we were doing because at the time we were doing maybe 9 or 10 movements. And that was it. So I added more movements in, so a little more volume. So, but I just kept like on my own trying different things within those principles.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So it wasn't like I was jumping around program to program. It was just like, let me keep trial and error this specific method. So again, the good thing was I was starting to perfect that system for myself through trial and error, but at the same time, I was really kind of distancing myself from learning outside of those methods or outside of that program, that structure.
Okay. So you just stopped looking?
Stopped looking, okay. Exactly. For years. For all the way up until I was in my late 30s, until I met the other guys at 3D Muscle Journey. And looking in hindsight, it just like put me in a box, in a bubble. And then I started defending that style of training. And I was like, it was hardcore. So I'm like, there's like, ego with that.
Yeah.
So everybody else at the gym that might be questioning what you're doing or whatever, or you look at them and you just think like, yeah, you don't know what you guys are doing. You guys are trained like pussies.
It's so hard also whenever, because I imagine, actually I know at that time you looked better than most people in the gym. So it's hard when someone comes up to you and tries to tell you anything different because somewhere in your head, because I've been there, you're like, but look at me, I must know what I'm talking about. Like I've totally been there, and I hate saying it, but when I did my first show and like I was all pretty fucking lean for like a good year after, and when people, and I was selling supplements, and when people would try to like tell me different, I'd be like, but they're like, I know what I'm talking about, obviously look at me. And it's so terrible.
And it didn't help too, like in high school, I was jacked, so it's like there wasn't too many jack kids in high school, so it's like everybody kind of looks at you like this authoritative figure. And then I trained in a little gym when I moved back to California. It was a little hometown gym. It was little big fish, so I was like one of the big fish. So it's like, you're the shit, and then you get this ego. You're training hardcore. It's almost like you build up this identity. But really, it was like it kept me in a bubble. It kept me from getting better, actually. So.
But at the same time, did that bubble help you because you weren't looking outward, for the hops or for the things to hop to, right? But, I mean, it could go both ways, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I could look back and go, okay, at the time, what was around me, what was there that could have been offered to me outside of what I was doing? Probably not a whole lot.
Yeah.
If I look back. So maybe at the time that might have been like a good thing.
Yeah.
But obviously now looking 20 years back, now it's like, okay, wow, yeah. Really sold myself short, And
it's funny, Andrea, that you mentioned that it goes both ways, because meeting Jeff, in 2006 is kind of what led to my program hopping, because up until then, doing maximum overload training, I was the big fish in the little pond.
You were sold.
Every
yeah.
time I went to a show, I was shredded and I won. So I was getting that reward, getting that reward, getting that reward. And then I met Jeff in 2006 in that little tiny show in Chico, California, and he stepped on the scale 1 pound like lighter than I was, and looked so much better. It kind of was like, Max OT is not working for me. I need to find something else.
That
led
funny.
to my program hop.
How one person
compared I had no idea what Jeff was doing, but I just knew that there was something else that I needed to start doing.
That's so funny that you could have invested in something for multiple years, and that one thing that makes you think there's a glimpse of something better, just boop, now it's not good enough. Wow.
It took because in 2009 is when I competed against Eric and met Berto, and then met back up with Brad. I was winning those shows, and I was still with the same style of training. Mm-hmm. And here's this guy Eric Helm saying, you really should try more volume, and Berto saying, you should try this nutritionally. And I'm like, that hard head, just like that big fish mentality, and like, who are these guys that tell me I just won these shows? I beat them. What are they talking about?
Yeah.
So it took a little, they had to really kind of get into my skull and get me to be more humble and to really be more open. And so I'm like, okay, let me try these little things here. Yeah. And then you start seeing like, oh shit, this actually can work. It starts working. You start seeing progress. So they really kind of opened my mind up to new ideas and to think outside the box and to not really get, brainwashed by like the program, like the labels, Max OT, HIT, just like all these labels that when you're not aware, you just get like, so like, oh, that's it. They sell you on the marketing and, the method. If you think about it, all the program's methods, that's all that it is principles. And it's the way you put things together, how you put the frequency, the volume, the intensity.
Yeah. What's so big to me that you said, Brad, was that you saw Jeff, and rather than thinking he's been training longer than me, or he genetically has a predisposition to grow a little better than me on what he's doing, like rather than anything else, you were like, that must be the way he's programming. Like you didn't think about food or genetics or when he started or whatever. It was just like, he's doing something I'm not. That's so interesting and common.
And totally overlooking. Yeah, and like you say, just totally overlooking, and really just because I didn't know, his symmetry is perfect. If God put together a perfect bodybuilder, it's pretty close to Jeff Albert's when you look at his hip to shoulder ratio and his muscle bellies. And I mean, obviously there's better ones that are out there, but like I said, he's pretty darn close. You know what I mean? And then you compare that to me. Here I am shredded. I mean, even at the time, Jeff goes, I don't think you can get much leaner, but I didn't have that symmetry, Didn't even know about that at the time.
Yeah.
I just knew that I needed to find something else to get as big as him,
And y'all have been, even though you're the same age, you guys, I mean, he's been training like 15 years longer than you or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's just there was like, there's literally hundreds of things that could have been in. You were like, but his program must be better than mine. I just think that's
exactly.
Something to note to the listener.
It probably wasn't.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is like,
in fact, that was probably way down here on the hierarchy. So.
Yeah. So, I just think that's an important thing. There's just so many movable parts, right? Like Jeff, you said there's principles, and there are a few, but you can. I mean, shit, people have been getting shredded with how many different types of variants of those principles for. I don't know, forever, you know?
Could go back, exactly. You could go back years, and people have been successful doing all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
What I'm learning now is in my mid-40s is like, there's still things that I take from HIT that I still apply now in my training.
Yeah.
Like if I have to get after, like, okay, I need to hit a certain rep target or whatever, and I'm like, okay, shit, this set's getting hard. I know how to grind because of the HIT. Like I grind with poise. Like I can get that last rep under full control.
Yeah.
Because of all that training that I had, that a lot of my training was in that type of environment.
That's a great
so
point.
When I do have to get after it from time to time, like I can do it without really busting myself up, or the fear of like, okay, I'm gonna get injured or whatever. Like I'm under control because of all that time under that type of environment.
Yeah, that's a good point, that two people could be following the exact same program, but if one knows what failure really feels like and knows what pushing their limits really feels like and knows how to push themselves, especially on accessories, versus someone who doesn't, could be getting a lot more out of it. The exact same program, and that's a really good point too. Is we need to leave on that there's a shit ton of variables, and then
I think program hopping. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, because you're gonna learn more the more things you try, obviously. But again, if let's say you're program hopping too frequently, or when you shouldn't be, then you're gonna sell yourself short of progress.
And now that you say that, I guess when you say too frequently, how I almost want to ask, like, how frequent is too frequent? But I think before we even go there, I think we should say that, like, there's ways of changing your program every mesocycle or two without completely obliterating and hopping to something completely different, right? And so when people think program, I think, it's not Wendler's or no. It's like 5-3-1. But even within Wendler's, there's like 5 or 6 different variants that he has within that book. Different ways you can follow it, right? But it's all the same, like, quote unquote program. So, I guess a good way to lead into that, Jeff, what's the longest you've ever followed a program? And was it the same the entire way, or do you, like, with the HIIT training, I know you changed a lot of the variables, but how long did you follow the main crux of it, I guess? The building blocks.
Well, I first started training with the guy that introduced it to me. I trained with him for like 4 to 6 months, somewhere in there. I followed everything he told me to do. Like, because I was training with him, I just followed his lead.
Right.
So there was no awareness of how I was feeling or any type of other, outside variables, or it's just like, here's what you're doing today. You're doing it regardless of anything else. And I would just follow it.
And then you took it from there and tweaked it a little bit, but would you say you were still following it?
Yeah.
Yeah, for like years.
Yeah. The same principle or same method for years, with just little slight variances.
Okay. And Brad,
and I still do that to this day with the way I train now.
See, this is interesting.
I still have a method, like I guess not a method, but a structure.
Right.
But within that structure, there's a lot of variables that get changed based on how I'm feeling: performance, recovery, stress levels, life, etc. Whereas that's the difference between me now versus me 20, 25, 30 years ago. It was like whatever was on paper, I was going to follow because I didn't know how to change things. But now I know how to change things because of the experience level. So I changed the variables to keep progress going.
Right. So I think that's great for a beginner, though. And I think that having something in black and white, following it for at least a while to know how to do that is important, because people who are inexperienced would be like, I don't feel like doing this today. Maybe to not know what it's like to push even when you don't feel like it, kind of thing. Brad, you followed Max OT for like forevers, right? You said I probably followed it a little. Yeah. And earlier in the conversation, you said I probably followed it a little too long. How long, I guess, is too long? I guess we could go back to that. What would y'all say is too long?
Yeah, and I mean, let's face it, we've got Eric on our team. He knows exactly what that number is.
I don't think it's a number, though. You know what I mean?
I don't think so.
No, it's not. It's not.
Right.
It's not. But he's probably got all the meta-analyses to kind of back up kind of a generalization of it. Exactly. Yeah. Pinch poke, you owe me a Coke. But yeah, I think you can follow a good sound program, for too long. I mean, let's face it. In its structure, a body part split that even though it does follow a very good progression, is always in the lower rep ranges. You know, just theoretically, is you're going to top out at some point, right? Because you can't just possibly just up and increase loads every. I mean, even if you are following that structure, sometimes you end up just following the same load with the same reps for probably half a year, you know. And so yeah, you get to this point to where, because of the harsh mentality of it and not being able to increase loads, and when you try to increase loads, you don't hit the rep ranges, so then you got to bring the loads back down, and then pretty soon the mentality comes back in. You start kind of getting this dropping volume effect, even though you're still following the program as best you can, you know, to the letter. And I think, like we were talking about, as a generalization, when you are beating yourself up trying to follow the program, if you were to break the numbers down, you know, whether it be because of mentality or whatever, I think you'll see the numbers are showing a gradually decreasing trend of volume. And looking at it in hindsight, when I went back to Max OT and even following the structure and doing it as best that I could, looking at it in hindsight, that's exactly what was happening. You know, I couldn't increase loads on the isolation movements like curls, side lateral raises, leg extensions, et cetera, et cetera. And you combine that with, I can't push as hard today, and I'm beating myself up because I didn't push very hard last week and I don't feel like it this week. Numbers start going down over time. And so that's why a lot of times now I think the worst of sticking to something too long is it's the bane of your existence. You know what I mean? If you can't stand to do this exercise or this program or this particular flow of exercises or whatever, you know, regardless of what the title is, you need to get away from that. And then now, of course, we know, you know, okay, well, we've got body parts list and we've got multiple, you know, times a week frequency, and we've got, you know, periodization and et cetera, that, you know, that kind of makes it new. But I think your line in the sand is basically numbers and volume are going down if you're not enthusiastic and excited about your training.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll go over some more ways in that we, like some non-numerical ways, right, when you know maybe this isn't working for you. But I think one thing that we probably should talk about is how, although a lot of programs have names, right, there's, it's not like you're on it or off it. It's not like you're putting labels to a way that certain tools are put together, but that doesn't mean that they're even different from each other, I guess. So like, a program is just your program. And again, if it's like, these are what is my compounds, these are my accessories, but my job changed, and instead of working 5 days a week for 8 hours, I now work 3 days a week for 12 hours, and I do the exact same amount of training, but I just moved it onto different days. And to some people, that's like, oh shit, you're on a new program. But to some people, it's like, I'm doing the exact same thing. I just moved it. So I think something we need to get away from is being married to the idea that this program does this and this program does that. When it's like, if you take that example I just gave, it's the exact same amount of volume over the exact same week, but maybe it's just moved around.
It's distributed differently so you can keep performing and recovering the best you possibly can.
Right, and you could have could sell one of those online with a different name than the other, but they're the exact same thing. And so I think it's just kind of go ahead.
Yeah.
That's my new pet peeve, is that these programs that get introduced, they have a label and they sell people. Mm-hmm. But within that program, when you start running it, it doesn't. You got to account for life. You got to account for your nutrition. You got to account for whatever phase you're in or whatever is going on. How do you alter those things within the program?
Right. So I think that's
keep.
Go ahead.
So, and you're almost like, obviously if you're young, you're just starting out, like you talked about, having a black and white to follow. Yeah, because you need that. But you also have to you have to learn to be self-aware. Like, you need to start taking notes within these programs you are running, so you can start to filter out what is working well, what's not working well, and make these little tweaks to the structure to keep things moving.
Right.
So that's just one of my personal pet peeves is like, because I've gotten sold on quote unquote program thinking like, okay, this is the magic bullet. I mean, if you're selling it or you're buying the product with, the awareness of like, okay, this is not the magic bullet. It's just a way to organize something. But sooner or later, you're going to have to reorganize things. Your closet is going to get dirty and you're going to have to clean it out.
Yeah, and like Brad said, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and maybe you were going to say the same thing, Andrea, is that really if you think about just periodization, I mean, basically that's all you're doing is you're just kind of reorganizing the same exercises. Mm-hmm. These exercises are heavier that are kind of in a lower rep range, and these exercises are lighter so that you can get more repetitions. And we go through phases and blocks of training where, this was a little bit heavier and this is lower repetitions. And if you think about it in terms of those labels, I mean, really, one of the things that I really liked about 531 when I first started doing it is because, in essence, it was max OT with higher repetitions. It was the same basic structure that we know about. You start with your compound movements, you start with your squat, you do your isolation movements afterward, and the basic structure of it is the same, but it's just a lot of times just the progression is a little bit different. Yeah. The progression with Max OT, you kind of deloaded about every 8 or 9 weeks. 531, you deloaded about 4 weeks. With Max OT, it was very linear. You go up and reps until you get 6, and you increase the weight, you start it over again. Whereas you look at 531, you kind of had an increasing level of intensity and a decreasing amount of repetitions until you deloaded, and then you started it over again. It was basically, for the most part, the same program and really similar to what we do now. And let's face it, there's a right way to program hop. Periodization is kind of program hopping the right way.
Exactly.
That you are introducing the right stimuluses at the right times, and then, expanding upon that and organizing it into like 6-month and year-long blocks of training.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like I was saying, what I was kind of sort of going your way, but you said something a little different, which I appreciate. But what I was saying and thinking was that if you set it up right and it has for whatever intermediate or whatever phase you're in, if it's undulated well, it includes the appropriate rep ranges for your goals over time. If it includes a lot of good sustainable forethought, then there's no reason you can't do like the base of it for years and years, and like Jeff said, and just manipulating in response to life, to the numbers, to how you're feeling, to when you need to run a specialization cycle, blah, blah, blah. But I just, there's a lot of people that think I'm doing this program for 12 weeks or 6 months or whatever, and then I'm going to this totally different program when it's like, you actually, if it's done well, there's no need for it at all, really. I mean, and Jeff, you're a great example. If I look at your YouTube video, your most recent time you went over your program on YouTube versus the one maybe I first saw from you in 2012, it would take a pretty intelligent person who's very familiar with a lot of these terms to recognize it's different. But a lot of people would be like, it's the same fucking thing. You know what I mean? If you look at the basis of it. So I guess that was kind of sort of the same thing you're saying, Brad, is that it can carry on with minute changes if it's has the rest included on a small and a big scale with deloads and all that stuff, or with off rest days, and like we said, a job change, or you have a kid, or you start school semester, or you have an injury, but it can be the same thing for years and years. I guess what would be some times where you feel like you do have to make those big shifts though? And Brad, you talked about one being if numerically and in your data you're going downhill. What are some other ones? Boredom.
Just like if you just, even if you're making good progress, but you're just like hating it and you're just bored out of your mind, chances are your enthusiasm is going to go down. Your motivation goes down. You're not going to probably perform as well just because of that. So sometimes, throwing something, like just overhauling something for the sake of boredom can be a good thing, a good change.
But not so often that it's going backwards. I find that a lot of my
not for impatience, though.
Yeah.
boredom and impatience
Different.
is two different things. So if you're
Two totally
impatient,
different
you
things. Yeah.
think what you're doing, because that happens a lot. You get that a lot. Is like people think that they could be progressing faster, so they get impatient and then they start overhauling the whole thing.
Right.
When maybe it just needs maybe just a little tweak here and there to maybe pick the pace up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Boredom is different than impatience. And I
Yeah,
think
and injury.
Injury, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That would
Aches,
be a good reason.
pains, yeah.
I think maybe that some people don't know the difference between boredom and impatience. Would y'all agree? New athletes?
That's why I said it's two different things.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'll be like, okay, so I get a lot too that I'm like, hey, we're going to do this. It's an 8-week thing. And when it's like week 7, they'll remind me, okay, so some people, and they tend to be the more experienced athletes, because I ask them to remind me when they're in their deload week usually, like, okay, week 7, I'm going to need a new sheet by next week. Just letting you know, right? And the newer, the athletes that are a little more experienced or they played other sports or whatever know that, okay, it's just the next 8 weeks based off of how we did this time. Whereas the newer ones will be like, okay, so what are we doing different this time? And it's like, well, nothing. It worked, right? Like,
yeah. And you give them the Burt stare, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're like, okay, I did my deload. I'm ready for, now I want to do powerlifting type things. And okay, 8 weeks later, that I'm kind of bored with the pack. Can we just really work on my butt? You know, like, and so, I think that comes with age and experience, and like you said, learning patience, and the mindset of a career athlete versus this show is going to help me look this way. I would think.
Yeah. I think like little changes though. Some things like just changing exercises can be all one needs to kind of get remotivated. It's something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just altering the rep ranges a little bit. Maybe even say, you know what, let's just throw an extra set on. Just a little more volume. That'll get people amped up.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. People don't get too excited when you say, you know what, let's actually lower volume down because you know you're probably a little too fatigued from the last spot. They don't like to hear that. It's demotivating. Sometimes it's beneficial though, but yeah, it's just little things like that can keep the same program itself rolling. Yeah.
So like, okay, you did zero rows this time, but I really want a rack row because this, and instead of like, and leaving open-ended programming too helps with a lot of my athletes. I feel like that fully understand, like, pick your favorite horizontal row and your favorite, incline chest press, and I'll tell them, like, you can't go at least 8 weeks before you change it, but as long as it's that type of movement, you're cool. Yeah. So leaving openness within programs, I guess, is a good way to not maybe feel like you need to hop so much.
I do that with on experience level.
Yeah.
Like, if there's more experience in the weight room, then I give them a little bit more freedom and flexibility. Or someone who has, let's say, a little more aches and pains, because I'm not there with them, so it would be dumb for me to say, okay, I need you to do a squat, but they have lower back issues. So, they would know better, okay, maybe a leg press or something like this would be a little bit better for them.
Okay.
So I do that, with a little more experienced athletes or someone who's maybe aches and pains. And I mean, of course, I help work around those aches and pains with them, but I don't dictate exercise selection when, I don't know their body as well as they do.
Yeah. So speaking of continuing on that with strategies of how to maybe keep yourself from program hopping so much if you know it's a problem, right? Because there's people that I think if they're really early, like, don't know they're doing it. They just really think every 12 weeks you pick a new online whatever, right? Because on bodybuilding.com, that's how they do them, is in 12 weeks. So I think once you know better, but you feel like, damn, I'm just hopping around a lot. I think we already mentioned a couple of really good ones, right? Flexibility, like we said, being a really flexibility and changing the things that aren't going to kill a program. Like you said, just subbing out exercises or whatever. Impatience versus boredom. I don't know if that's really a strategy, but I guess learning how to be patient. And how do you learn that? Education, maybe?
I think
for
so.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you learn
It's
the foundations of training, all the Eric's books, the pyramids. I mean,
Hey.
it's all there. It's
Yeah.
then it becomes, once you know the levels of all these things you got to incorporate, then it's like, how do I put that shit together? That becomes the next question. And that's where I feel like, okay, maybe having someone who has experience put it together for you, and then help you run it, and then you get feedback, then it helps you to understand when, how, where to make these little changes that we've been talking about. But if you just, let's say, go out and buy an 8-week program and there's no guidance, you're just basically becoming a prisoner to a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
You're just following it blindly because you have no knowledge of how to make these changes. That 99% of the time, you're going to have to make changes.
Yeah.
They're going to come at some point. Or otherwise, you're going to be like me and Brad, sticking to the same thing over and over, and kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So at least, like, to me, it's like, if I had to go back in time and do it all over again, I would be like, I would hire these 3D guys, or I'd hire some other Bryce Lewis or someone like that who knows how to program and knows how to adjust. Have them coach me for a little while. It could be just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever. Then you get comfortable with how to make these changes, and you start learning, and you start getting more self-aware until you become independent. The last thing you want to do is be like me, like 20 years later, and still trying to find the magic bullet, the program, or being married to the program for that long.
Yeah.
Because you're hindering your growth, like physical and mental growth.
Good point. Go ahead, Brad.
And with that same education, type of a title, or I guess segue that you talked about, Andrea, is, you just kind of look at what, the, I don't know if you want to call them gurus or whatever, but just kind of look at some of the stuff that they put out there, and a lot of times, you ask your coach, they're going to have, what was that quote that Mike Zertos had in that one podcast that we had, where you take the scientific principles, and then us as practitioners, we know how to apply those principles, to the athlete. I can't remember the exact quote. I could probably look it up on here. But, one of the things that I really drive home to a lot of my kind of folks that are kind of out of the love of their first program, and they're looking for that next program, and they're looking at, well, should I shock the body? Should I just totally revamp everything? And I'm like, well, that's fine. The one thing you have to realize is that, the scientific evidence shows that those first few weeks of that new exercise that you're doing, that new movement, you're just getting good at it. You're just getting those neurologic adaptations. And so you're not going to want to do that for a couple, 2, 3 weeks, and then think, oh, I need to shock the body, and I need to go do a different exercise now.
Right.
And, then I got to do this. You're essentially moving away from what is just starting to work, and going to something that is now, new, that you need to get used to it again. And during that phase, it's not working. So obviously, if it's an experienced athlete, we can kind of say, using those scientific principles, okay, you've done this a long time. And for you, there's not too much new learning if you go from your competition squat to a box squat. That, we can probably get away with that. However, you're barely learning how to squat, and right now you're just getting good at squatting. To go and shift to a box squat, you're going to have to learn all over again. And then all of those gains that you could have been getting by just running that same squat, being smart with changing the right principles, you're now losing out on, and you're kind of starting over again. So sometimes that's kind of a slap in the face for some folks. They're just like, oh my God, what was I doing? And it's being able to not only recognize that and educate yourself that way, but then also know, okay, I've been lifting for 20 years. Does it really matter if I do a supinated dumbbell curl, or an easy bar curl? You've done that many, many, many times. There's no newness that you need to get past. You can probably just almost use that kind of at will, depending on your environment, the gym setting, etc. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? However, if you've never done a seal row before, and you're going to do a seal row for 3 weeks because it's new and fancy, and they got that new seal row place that you can do that, and then you're going to shock the body and you're going to go back to rack rows or pendlay rows or whatever, that you might want to rethink, especially if you're a new lifter.
Right. All good points, Brad. So there are things like Jeff mentioned, like tools that you can manipulate that can make it new or that can help you get through things in, like changing frequency, changing, there's a lot of small things you can change that will keep the crux of the program in place. But like you mentioned, Brad, there are some things that are just kind of dumb, and it's kind of put you backwards or set you off your course. And so knowing the differences, like you said, comes with education. So there are things like books and shit. But even better would be, like I said, get a coach.
Yeah, because
I think coaching is.
You get somebody with experience; they're going to be able to guide you.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you know what? You probably shouldn't have did that. This is why. You're gonna learn more so than just like reading it. You read it, then you got to go try to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
Because you could absorb all the books and all you want. You could soak that in your brain. You still got to go out there and execute.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother level of learning too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, learning the self always is, like, if you, is it you, Jeff, that doesn't bench anymore, only dumbbell press, right? Or Berto did that for a long time. He didn't bench for a long time.
Yeah. At the moment, I haven't touched bench press in a few months probably.
Yeah, and does that mean that your chest is shrinking into like nothing? No, because
No.
So like but you decided to pick like your one-arm overhead press, and that's your bread and butter, and you do that for years, and like it's going to be all right. It doesn't mean
it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might even be better
Yes.
because now I could actually progress on that movement because now I'm not hurting as much as I was with the barbell.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the question is, what's better, barbell or dumbbell?
Yeah.
Depends on a shit ton of variables, Like, let's just say in theory the barbell was better, right? So now I'm trying to force myself to do barbell because they say the barbell is better. Well, if I'm getting banged up and hurt every time I'm doing it, I'm only going to go so far with it.
Exactly.
I'm probably going to shortchange my progress or put myself on the sideline.
Yeah.
So even if, let's say, the dumbbell is inferior, which I don't think it is, let's just say it was, but all of a sudden now it's superior for me because I could do it every single workout. I'm consistent with it. I'm going to make more progress that way.
Right.
So it's not about like this versus that. It's there's different scenarios, different variables. You got to pick your tools and what works best for you, and that takes trial and error at times, taking a lot of experience to figure out, and time to figure out, okay, what are the best tools that are working for me? And the more tools you have, you know how to apply these tools at any given time. So the things I'm doing now, a lot different than what I was doing even a year ago. It's because my environment's changed. Right. But I'm able to adapt to it. Like I had tennis elbow for what?
A long
9,
time.
10 months.
Yeah.
BFR training. It wasn't like, okay, BFR is better than regular training, but at the time it was because that's what I can
do. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's another good thing too, is like with coaching and maybe you do say hire someone to do your programming one time or something like that. And that's obviously, again, we're going to say better than nothing. But I think something that I enjoy about being coached and about coaching my athletes is that we're learning you together. So we're helping you learn you because we still don't know you. Like, it's not like we do your program one time and it's right. That's not
exactly.
Yeah, it's just
point.
It's we do it once and then there's the feedback loop, and if it's off season every 4, 8, 16 weeks, whatever, we check in. What did work? What didn't work? Why didn't it work? Like I just had a Skype yesterday with one of my off season athletes who now has a kid and is just coming off of a 3-week vacation, and we are planning to do a lot less this program than we did the last 2, because the last 2 reports you'd come back and not have a full spreadsheet done because the kid's this and the wife's that. Like we thought he could do 6 days a week, but after a couple tries of it, no matter how well-intentioned he was, he's got this family with these 2 babies. And so now to make him better, we're doing less training. And our goal this time is to complete the full 8-week spreadsheet, And that's not because I'm giving up on him or because because I want him to make progress, and we can't do without a baseline, which we talked about before. But there are rare occasions where taking a step back or doing what feels like less will be far superior for you in the long run.
Exactly.
But I don't feel like I'm a better programmer now. It's just we're figuring out what's the better program for him, and it took us a while.
I also think though, so here's the thing though, is like you have the experience and the ability to troubleshoot the reasons why things aren't working. So you're able to guide him in the future. Whereas if it's someone who doesn't have that experience, how do they know? How do they're not self-aware enough to make these changes that will be a productive change.
Right. That's
why you have a coach. It's like they help you because they have the knowledge and the experience level to help guide you, and they teach you how to make these changes, and you become confident with these changes that you're going to be making. That's the value of a coach.
Yeah,
and that's to me is far more valuable than the program.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brad.
Well, and I was going to say that's huge too, is just having that client buy-in and the value of the coach's knowledge. You're probably also thinking, Andrea, or at least the way I'm kind of interpreting is you're thinking big picture. Sometimes when we as individuals, we kind of tend to think small picture and just kind of think in these few weeks and months. But, with you're kind of thinking, okay, yeah, this is a tough period of time, but, you're able to kind of say, okay, well, in the term of like 4 years here, this little short term of lower, I can't remember what you said, if it was lower volume or less training or whatever.
Less days.
It isn't going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt you at all. In fact, really, it's probably due. It's probably kind of the way it should look like in the big picture of things.
Yeah.
At least if I interpreted you correctly. But you just really kind of struck a chord with me on a fascinating conversation that I had with a guy just yesterday at the gym that I train at in Reno. I mean, an elite power lifter. I mean, this guy, he's totaled 2,000 pounds more than one occasion on different, meets. And he was talking about, like, with his training, he actually goes through like 4-month phases where he even had titles for him, and it was fascinating. He kind of had like what he called his off season, and he actually had a term for it. I can't remember what it was, but he purposely for 4 months will bring down all of his intensities and train with higher volume. And he'll do that for like 4 months. And then I think he said some sort of a preparatory phase is like the next 3 or 4 months where he slowly starts to bring up the intensities and he slowly brings down the volume on purpose, because that's that 4 months block that is intended to do that. And during that 4 months, he does what some might consider the bad thing of program hopping. He kind of will do some conjugate stuff where he'll actually start training, squats with a buffalo bar. He'll do some accommodating resistance with chains and, bands and things like that. And then he had an actual, I want to say he called it the preparatory phase, where volume is purposely low. He'll bring volume way down, and he'll purposely go from 3s to 2s to singles, but intensity comes way up.
Mm-hmm.
And if he was my coach, I would be like, oh, well, that all makes perfect sense. We can get away with low volume right now, and it's probably going to do us a lot of good,
Yeah.
And that when you talked about that, there's just because all the time you'll hear these newbies be like, help me, I don't know what to do. My volume is so high and I'm afraid to drop it because I'll lose my gains, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, what? That is the best thing for you to do right now.
Yeah.
That is the best thing for you to do right now is train less frequently, run that for a good period of time, and then kind of get back into your phase. But it was just fascinating talking with him being so big picture and him talking about prepping for a competition 35 weeks before his powerlifting meet.
Whew. Yeah. Something you said, Jeff, that struck a chord with me too, and those are all really good points, Brad, was it's a productive change versus an addition, right? me saying for you, this certain athlete I had, we need to do less so that you can report back with the full sheet. A lot of people see that as a step backwards, where it needed to happen in order to give us a baseline, because we have nowhere to go from now. Like, even if we never had 100%, because of the crazy busy life, never had 100% returned full 8 week of training, but even like say 90% of it was more than the program that we're just going to get into. But this time we'll actually know what we did, because it will be finished, and I think what I want to get to the listeners too is what I did or what we're doing with this athlete. Berto has had to do to me multiple times. My coach and my doctor in last year have had to do to me multiple times, because I don't like to do it. Like, I think, like, I need coaches to calm me down the same way to a lot of my athletes, calm them down. It doesn't mean that I'm good at this personally. As an athlete, I need a coach to tell me, like, chill out, you're being crazy, Still to this day, and for whatever reason, like, I have no problem, because y'all taught me so well and Bert coached me so well. I can see it big picture, like Brad said, from a distance. But when I'm in it, I get pretty blinded by it too. Like, I don't like feeling like a puss, Brad says. But I know that for as long as I'm competing in whatever sport, whether I need a coach or not is not as relevant as I know I do better with a coach. And so that's my choice. It's not whether I can do it on my own or not. I obviously have the knowledge and I can do it for all my athletes. But I guess I'm self-aware enough to know me, and I hate feeling like a pussy. I hate it. But I have people built into my life that help me deal with that, which is the best thing I can do for me, is recognize that that's not a strength of mine. And so if you are program hopping, whether you're educated or not, I don't think it's like an embarrassing thing, or like I think people sometimes feel like if they need a coach, like, I have a degree and I'm a personal trainer, so I shouldn't need a coach. And I don't think that maybe that's the best solution for a lot of people. Like you said, Jeff, there's a lot of ego.
Well, I have a guy on my roster now. He's got a PhD.
Yeah.
In what we do, so he's highly more educated than I am. But I'm his coach, and so it's like, and I do his programming, but we just program together, like, lifestyle, all that stuff taken into consideration. But we bounced ideas back and forth off of each other,
right?
So we can come up with, in theory, a good program that's going to work for his environment, like, his lifestyle, work, all that stuff. Not just, okay, in theory, I'm going to program this much volume. He needs to do this much volume by the end of the block, yada, yada, yada. Because if I program something that just doesn't jive with his lifestyle, let's say the volume's just way too high for the amount of time he has to train, it's going to run him into the ground.
Yeah.
It's gonna, so to me, it's like, it's got to be, you gotta ask questions. You gotta have some type of knowledge of the person's background, just the whole 9 yards, what their work schedule's like, how much sleep they get, et cetera, et cetera. Because otherwise, when you go to program, you're programming blindly, basically, or you're just programming based on
a perfect
what the
human
science is saying. What the science is saying, exactly.
Yeah.
So
another thing,
Andrea, you just brought up a.
Go ahead.
Why don't you go ahead? Because I got mine locked in.
Okay. The other thing I was going to say, and that Jeff just reminded me of, is this also, I keep talking about the same damn athlete, but we just talked like 24 hours ago. Another thing with him too is the way that his lifestyle changed. Is that he now walks like 10 to 20,000 steps a day with his,
Oh, wow.
and he wasn't doing that before. And so that's life volume right there. That's definitely like, it's like, okay, we can't, even if we could do it before, we can't train as much as we were, because you're on your legs for another freaking few hours a day. And so that is another reason why a program would need to change, right? He doesn't work any more than he used to. He doesn't, it's more of like a commuting thing, like a big lifestyle change. That contributes to your recovery.
That's going to change how he needs to eat and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Huge, So I guess that would be another really good example of a lifestyle change that would cause the need for a program overhaul.
Yep.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, and that's gonna change how he's gonna need to eat and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Big changes for
Because
this
that
one.
there neat.
That
Well, what I was gonna say, Andrea, is
Did he just say
you
that
just
there, neat?
he did.
that's what I said. That there neat. You just kind of taught me something that is really big. Is we're kind of talking about, okay, do we go books or do we go coaches?
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately it really almost comes down to not even having anything to do with our sport. It's what you were saying, that self awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Which way do we respond better? Because you just brought up a great point. Like I mean, we meet with folks all the time, like dozens of new folks a month. And I've met folks that have never had a coach at all.
Mm-hmm.
But they've read Eric's books, or they followed some of our YouTube stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll send me something that I'll be like, wow, this is really good. You know what I mean? And obviously I guess that person must be self-aware enough to know that, they probably do really good with book reading and they're able to, and I mean, I don't know. We only meet for like an hour and a half, or 2 hours. I don't really know what they all did to come upon this, if they did several bouts of trial and error or whatever. But then, a lot of times, like folks, they don't do good with books. Either they don't have sometimes when I'm reading too much, my mind wanders and I can't focus, on what it is that I'm trying to learn. Or, maybe let's just face it, some people don't read good. They do better watching YouTube videos and
Mm-hmm.
seeing people do things and seeing graphs and charts, and things like that. And, so maybe if the person doesn't, or if they have the self awareness to know, I can't take what a book says or what this says or whatever and be able to apply it, well, then maybe that's the kind of person that would do better with a coach, where
Yeah.
they can kind of get it
Yeah.
divvied out to them in little bite-sized samples, kind of like my preacher does when he's giving me my little bite-sized samples of scripture that I can actually understand. That might be a person that needs the coach, and yeah, so which is right? Gosh, I think it ultimately comes down to just self-awareness. Which are you? And some people don't even know that. I didn't even know I was coachable until,
I,
2-3 years ago. So
I got a quick story, kind of similar to what Brad's talking about. Like I've had a few first time Skypes where they come in and they've read the pyramids. They're following like one of the sample
Mm-hmm.
in there, which and they're not too self-aware, or they're not confident with it, and they're not sure if it's the right thing they should be doing. So once you talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours, you get a sense like, okay, they need a little bit more help. But I've actually had one Skype where I got the application, I looked at, I'm like, on paper, I'm like looking at the guy's physique, the pictures, I'm looking at everything he's written down for his program, his nutrition. I'm like, this guy does not need no help, So basically, once I got on the Skype, talked to him for about 10 or 15 minutes. It's like Brad said, he was so self-aware. I'm like, I just say, you know what, we don't need to do this. I reached out, I said, I'm going to give you your money back. You're good to go. And and it just, all's what he needed was someone to just tell him, you're okay.
Yeah.
Give him that look, like that reassurance that what you're doing, you're on the right path, you're doing fine, you're doing good. So this was like a 10, 15 minute Skype, and I refunded his money.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But I think
yeah, and I mean, look
the
at
value of
this.
that's huge. Someone you respect telling you it's going to be all right. That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. That's nice, Jeff. That's all.
That's all good.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. And I mean, Jeff, you probably just have the same amount of people. Well, maybe not, because you probably don't. You have to make a living, but you probably have the same amount of people that read the books and have a program that's set up, and they just totally twisted it all around, and they're doing weekly progressions all in one day or something like that, And yeah, those are the people that it's like, well, you know what? I think you probably should have invested in a coach, because you've taken everything that was said there, twisted it around, and come up with something that really doesn't make much sense if you really understood things a little bit better and maybe did have somebody verbally divvy out that information to you.
Yeah. I think I'd say probably if I generalize the number of people I've interacted with as far as setting up protocols, I can't put an exact percentage on it, but way more than not. The issue is they don't have a structure.
Yeah.
There's no structure. So, like I said earlier, even though, let's say, my structure back in high school wasn't the best, it was still something I followed and I was consistent with it, so I was able to progress. Whereas a lot of people, they don't have a structure, and then they waffle, meaning they jump around too frequently, or even let's say they research far too much online. They read too much, far too much. I've had some athletes where I say, you know what, I don't want you looking at anything on the internet. Just so you can see what the hell you're doing right now, the structure that you're on, so you can see if it's working for you or not. Because people, like you said, they get impatient or overeager, and they just want to bail. They want to bail on programs like left and right, where they don't have structure.
Another thing this happens to me. It happened to me a lot when I was taking a lot of Skypes was I like to get, okay, we've scheduled this, the call's in 2 weeks. I have all their information here, what they've been eating, what they've been training according to when they submit their application, right? And 2-3 weeks later,
it's changed.
You have the Skype call and they're like, well, what?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so you're eating this much? Well, like 3 or 4 days a week, because this weekend we did it. Okay, so this is your training? Well, it was, but since I knew we were setting up this call, I'm like, oh, wow. But it would happen a lot. But I'm like, we just set this up in 3 weeks.
Quite often. Yeah, because usually the Skype calls anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks later after the application comes in, and you're like, so you still doing what you're doing here? No, changed it.
Yeah.
Why'd you change it? Oh, because, it's this and that. So
yeah, it's crazy.
You get that a lot. So a lot of it, it's, like I said, impatience, over-eagerness. Could be they're just not as sure what they're doing. So it's like, oh, maybe I should change it. Don't know. So
So another maybe actionable piece too, or a reason why they might want to coach would just be accountability. Maybe they do need, I know Jeff told that one guy, you're doing a good job, see ya. But I think a lot of people too do really well, I mean, with expectations. Like, I have to report this back to a person who I care what their opinion is. And that does wonders for a lot of people. And it's funny too, like, when you think about things that you don't have a choice on, like job or school deadlines, you get it done because the teacher said, because the boss said, And I think a big value for coaching, whether you need it or not, with your knowledge base, is like you have someone to report to now. And there's people that need that for a year. Some people that just need it every, in between programs. Just, I have to turn in my sheet, or somebody knows I didn't, and that can be really valuable.
And some people feel like they need it more than they do. They're like, oh, I really need to report to you every week. And I'll be like, no, you don't, because this is what it's going to be like. I'm going to charge you $100, and it's going to say, you know what, you're doing great, do it again. And then the next week, you're going to report in, I'm going to say, you know what, you're doing great, do it again. Do you really want to pay for that?
But some people do.
Do what you're supposed to.
Some people, that
it goes
is
both
extremely
ways.
Valuable.
Yeah.
Extremely. Everybody has their different, what they need. Their needs are different.
It is, but I just like to outline it for them right off the bat. Do you really want to pay for me to say this? Because that's what's going to happen,
I'll do that.
If they're good with that, that's fine.
I'll use that as a tool to get people to stay disciplined. Like, I'll say, okay, we're going to Skype again, but if you're not precise and you're not executing, you're not being consistent with what we've just set up, I'm going to tell you straight up right now, my answer is going to be get more precise and get more consistent, because the data that you just gave me is so inconsistent, I can't do my job for you to make the changes.
Right.
So I'll use that as a tool, like, hey, okay, you need to get on your shit. Otherwise, you're not. The more you put in, the more you get out. That's the bottom line, with anything.
Yeah. So with patience in mind, what do y'all think are a couple ways that people could very specifically work on that other than education? Like, one of the things that I find myself saying a lot to people who want to compete or are getting ready for competing for for the first time or the second time, like just early in their career, it's like, well, how do you view this? Are you looking at through the lens of I don't like how I look right now and I want to look better, or are you looking at through the lens of this is my career as an athlete? And a lot of times that's more weight loss patients, but it's like they want to lose their weight now. It's not coming off fast enough, or I won't let them diet now, kind of thing. And it's like this is setting us up for a long-term plan versus an emotional attachment you have with the way your jeans fit or whether this guy thinks you're hot. So that's
Patience
one
is
shift.
it's a
hard.
tough sell.
Yeah.
Patience is a tough sell. It's probably just because, I mean, let's face it, when we're talking programming, we're talking, okay, in a sense, building muscle or getting stronger. It takes time.
Yeah.
Especially as a natural athlete, and it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of hard work, a lot of consistency. I mean, all cliche stuff, but it's so true. And the more you can really embrace that and accept that and have, poise through the process, you're going to enjoy the process a lot more so. You're going to be in a more serene environment because you're just like really just calm, cool, collected, and you can really accept, and you can become more self-aware because of that patience too, because you're not letting the insecurities and all that type of emotional stuff to cloud, your judgments, to really kind of step outside of what you're doing to look in to see, okay, yeah, this is working, this isn't working. If you're just impatient, I mean, you're just like, your stress levels are going to be like, ooh, up here.
Yeah.
It's going to cloud your mind.
Another thing.
Well, and another thing that.
Go ahead, Brad.
How funny! We said this. We said the exact same thing.
So many Cokes and pinches.
You guys just said puss. I don't know how many times, but
I say pussy. Yeah. Brad's the one saying. Making me
gosh,
look
what was I going to say? Yeah, I think in answer to your question too, Andrea, is I think the big thing too is just keep the goal the goal. That's I think Bert kind of coined that, if I'm not mistaken.
Dan John.
Dan John.
Is that who it was?
Yeah.
I should know that. I learned.
It's okay. Bert says it a lot. We can give him secondary credit.
I don't think there's really anything wrong with program hopping if your goal changes. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
Like for example, say that.
Good point.
Yeah.
Say that your goal is bodybuilding right now, and you're on a very hypertrophy focused program, and you're like, you know what? Like the wife, I want to play football now. I want to play football. I'm vested and I'm on this football team. I'd be like, the goal's changed.
Yeah.
We don't need hypertrophy training here, Mm-hmm. And so then we think about, okay, we need to revamp things here, program hop to something else. So I think a good amount of emotional attachment needs to happen to the goal. You know what I mean? Is this truly your goal? We can set a program up that is going to get you to this goal, but if this goal is going to change in a month or two, maybe we should just kind of evaluate what is truly your goal here. What is your theme, your mission, whatever.
Yeah, because that's a really good point, Brad. Wow. Like if you have, like for example, I have a guy, this hasn't happened recently, but he is a fitness model. And so maybe we are in an off-season gaining phase, and he says, actually, I booked a shoot in a month. Well, then maybe our program wouldn't change, I guess, because, damn it, that's the wrong thing. It'd be more dietary. But that's a good
Your
point
diet
of like
programming would change.
Yeah, so you're off of you're slightly changing course for this small temporary thing, and then you hop right back on, kind of thing. That's a really good point, Brad. Another thing might be tracking other stuff. I think that's the last thing I had written down. A way to, like, if patience is a problem, what are and like you said, muscle growth is like the slowest thing ever. What are other ways that we could track progress? The obvious one is strength, obviously, too, but that's also slow as shit a lot of the time. Like something I love that you do, Jeff, is you'll note multi-rep PRs, or like this certain, this 3x3 hasn't felt this easy in I don't know how long, because you know what easy and hard feels like. Other things might be, I got through this dieting phase without quitting my job this time. Or, like, there's a lot of other things that you can track. Like me, right now, I know it's different, like with grid, like I was super stoked Not that it has to do with grid, but I was doing weighted chin-ups for the first time 4 weeks ago, and every time it comes on this certain day of the week, and every day that it comes up in my program, he's like, weighted chin-ups. I want you to do 5x3, take as long as you need in between, and try to go heavier than last week. Try to go heavier than last week. Try to go. And for me, it was like I can only do 15 pounds on all sets. The next one, I did 20 pounds and then 15 for the rest. And I did 20, 20, 15, 15, 15. Like, all of those felt like PRs because I'm in the mindset of I beat last week.
Exactly.
Not that in this game you're always going to beat every week, but there are games you can play with yourself. I don't know. I just think...
Shoot, if you were to do that in another couple months and your rest periods were shorter, to me, that would be a big gain.
Yeah.
Maybe progress. Or if your reps got cleaner.
That's a good point, too. Or a faster squat. Or certain, you know, so there's, I guess what we're all trying to illustrate is like, it's not, if you only give yourself one goal and it's like that goal or I suck, then you're going to be really upset a lot of the time.
You can be frustrated a lot.
Yeah. And because there's a lot of things that you can do if you're looking. I think we've talked about this in other podcasts before, but I think that's a way to maybe keep the same program for longer, but you're looking for the changes, or for this thing is a little easier, or this one extra rep, or this 2 extra pounds. Buy fractional plates. I mean, that could be another thing if you really need to feel. Yeah. Cool. I think we've covered quite a bit. Y'all want to leave with a couple of comments on if you have someone who knows their basics and is wondering, why the fuck do I still keep popping programs? How can I get better at this? Any parting advice, Brad?
Yeah, that's hard because I've been there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I could really add anything, really, to be honest with you, other than what we've already said. Except to say I can sympathize, you know.
Yeah. Is that you can get out of it? That is one thing. You can stop it. You have the agency to do that.
You do. Yeah, it's always a choice.
Yeah.
I think since I've been training the longest for 31 years, I'd say that if I can go back in time, I would look towards someone who is pretty knowledgeable and just really kind of learn. And it doesn't have to be one person. It could be multiple people.
Yeah.
Because I've learned from multiple people. But to have an open mind and to learn from other people, that will kind of guide you so you can become self-reliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's something I'm really proud of right now. Is like, I don't need someone to program me. And it's not to say that someone might be able to program me better than I can right now, but I know myself so well that there's no one else out there that's going to be able to tell me, okay, you need to do this today or tomorrow, or whatever. Because I've seen it. I'm living it right now. There's too self-aware. So it's taken me a long time to get to this point, though, to be able to feel really comfortable with that. So that's what I'm saying. Get someone who will help guide you so you can become self-aware to where you're very independent.
Yeah, that's really good. How long did it take you to get there?
I'm 45.
Well, how long till you felt? I've
been training for 31 years, so
how long till you felt I got this?
I felt this way probably the last couple of years, maybe 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
Because basically, once I met the 3D guys, I was in my late 30s. After a couple of preps and a few years hanging with these dudes, I could say I got a lot of good tools now.
Okay, so
and I know how to use them. Yeah.
If you don't want to wait 20 years, then maybe a way to expedite that would be, like he said, find a person or two that is knowledgeable. And in my just opinion, I say find a coach as soon as you can that you trust, personally. Because it would just be even faster than reading all the things. And they could help guide you.
If I could go back 30 years, it would have been saying I would have been independent, let's say, at 30 years old versus 43 or 44. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for chatting. We'll see y'all next week.